Welcome back to another episode of the Miami Heat Roundtable. I'm your host, Amir, and I'm joined today by Martel. You can find Martel at the Miami Heat Zone podcast. We also have Ernest. You can find him at Miami Heat Talk. Plus, we have another special guest joining the program today. We got Alex Toledo from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us today, Alex.
What's going on?
Not much, man. Just excited to talk Miami Heat basketball with you.
Let's go.
To get started, though, let's start off with Martel. Martel has a few questions. You want to hop in first, Martel?
All right, sounds good. All right, so Alex, you and Ethan were talking about Trae Young, and I know a lot of people, don't like Trae Young because of the shot chucking and defense. But what do you think about Trae Young fitting on this Miami Heat team? Because what he was able to do with John Collins and Clint Capella, I just feel like there's been no one on this roster, especially at the point guard, to maximize Bam Adebayo. And trust me, I think that the shot chucking would kind of go away because not only is he playing under Spo and he's playing with more of a structured team. I just think that Trae Young would be a solid fit. And then my second question to you is, what do you think about help next to Bam Adebayo? Because we cannot continue to have a 6'5" power forward, and then by the time Bam Adebayo gets to the playoffs, he's exhausted. So what do you think about those two questions?
Well, for the first one, like we talked about on Five on the Floor, I think the Trae Young stuff is kind of interesting because, it doesn't feel like a Heat type of acquisition in some ways when it comes to like his defense and, his reputation is, like you said, somebody, being kind of a ball hog, a chucker, even though he does, he's an elite passer and has an elite assist percentage literally every season of his career, while maintaining a low turnover percentage, which is like what you want in a point guard. Everybody wants the Heat to be able to like generate more offense, easier offense. That's kind of what he does. That doesn't mean he's the best at doing it, but he is a damn good player for all his flaws. Like gets to he had kind of a down year this past season when it comes to attempts at the rim when I was looking at his numbers, but for his career, for a small guard, gets to the rim pretty well. The finishing numbers aren't amazing, but I think it's more of it's more of a kind of a difficulty thing with him because he takes a lot of contested floaters and things of that nature. He's not like missing a lot of bunnies or anything like that. He can obviously shoot from anywhere. He is like, I think him and Bam will be a fantastic pick and roll partnership that will be able to open up other things for other guys. Like, I think they should look into it. I just, like I said on the show, I don't see it happening because I can't imagine the Heat giving up. Like, let's say it's a package where Tyler and Duncan are thrown in there to make the money work, where it's that plus, let's say, one of Hawkins or Jovic, their 15th pick in the draft this year, their first round pick, maybe their second as well, along with another protected pick, like a package like that we've seen in a modern NBA. Excuse me, where it's a lot of draft pick capital. I don't know that the Heat, like if I had to predict, I would say they probably are not willing to pony up all that for a Trae Young as opposed to a Donovan Mitchell. And I know that everybody is going to say, like, has like a lot of the commenters on our YouTube video about it were like, yeah, I prefer this guy. Yeah, we all prefer somebody else. Like, none of us are like Trae Young super fans, but it's like, a Donovan Mitchell may not become available. I don't think Kevin Durant is available, and is going to be available at least this offseason. I don't see it unless all of a sudden like Devin Booker wants out. I just don't see it happening. I think they just started there, and they got beat, pretty swiftly by a team that looks like they might win a title. It's going to be either them or the Nuggets, in my opinion. And like, I don't think they're done yet. So yeah, we all prefer Donovan Mitchell or Kevin Durant, but it's not that easy. So if a guy like that becomes available, I think they consider it. I think they do, but I don't ultimately see it happening. I think the defense, you can work around it, but it is something that you constantly have to be, on top of, and it's gonna get abused in the playoffs. We've seen it with, Tyler, Duncan, other guys in the past. Trae is worse than all of them as a defender, even though he had kind of his best year as a defender this year. It's still not good. So I think it's something that might be worth looking into if you can, do it at the right price. I just don't see the Heat doing that. It would be fun though. Like it would be fun. I think they could get him to be the best version of himself here. And as far as the other question, I agree. I just don't know how they do it. I don't know when it comes to like the size thing, and I agree to a certain like degree because I don't want to start applauding slow big man next to Bam. It needs to be and somebody who is a questionable shooter. It needs to be somebody who can shoot. And I know, Bam isn't a non-shooter anymore, but I you don't want Bam to be a spacer for you more often than not. And so I think the other big needs to be a spacer, which of course Jovic has kind of been that guy for them as of late, and we've seen it. We saw it with K-Love in the season before. We saw it with Kelly and Myers in the first season. Like, they're willing to do it, but it has to be somebody who can stretch the floor, and ideally somebody who can play defense. I just think that's so hard to find. There's not that many bigs that fill that, and most of them are not really like available. And like, I know some people might point out, oh, Jonas Valanciunas, the Heat don't have money to spend in the offseason. They're way over the cap. They're way over the luxury tax. Like, it's not going to happen unless he wants to accept, the veteran minimum, which he's obviously not going to. Like, and I don't really consider him a stretch big either. Just because you can't shoot doesn't mean you're a stretch big, right? I think that's a big difference. I think, like, if most of your shots are going to be from three, you got to be good from there. It can't just be like a small part of your game, right? And so I just think that archetype is really hard to find. Maybe they draft a front court guy. I think that would probably be my best guess as to, like, the excuse me, as to the type of player that they go after. But they do end up going best player available more often than not in recent years. So I don't know if it's going to be a positional thing. I think, you keep going with Jovic. I think you bring Love back. And if something like that becomes available, go after it. I just don't see where you do it if you're not, like, drafting somebody there.
Got you. Thank you, man.
So, Alex, Pat Riley last week in his presser promised changes are coming to the Miami Heat. He talked about availability as the big theme, as we've all talked about the past week. But he also suggested that he's not going to tear down the team. That's not in the cards. So, as much as we want Donovan, he hasn't technically requested a trade, and it's really hard to get all-stars and superstars. So, the sentiment on Heat Twitter and just in general is that we're going to run it back. So my question to you is, do you predict that we're going to run it back with the core, let's say the four of Terry, Tyler, Jimmy, Bam? Of course, we have Jovic and Hawkes. We're going to have to replace probably Caleb and Haywood with minimum guys. Do you think that's going to most likely happen? Or do you think there is a likelihood we could trade? Because we have to trade. We have no cap space. That's our only opportunity. You can't really sign any free agents like Paul George or DeMar or anybody like that. Or do you think we're going to try and test out trading Tyler Hero once again, or Terry Rozier, getting rotational players like guys with size, perhaps I hate Kuzma, but perhaps a Kuzma, or perhaps guys that we missed out on like this last season, PJ Washington, Gafford, and players like that? What direction do you predict will go?
Honestly, I don't want to cop out, but I don't really have a prediction. I think, like, I wouldn't be surprised if the first option came true, where it's like, maybe they bring back one of Haywood or Caleb. Maybe they bring back neither and got to replace them with veteran minimums, which is not a fun scenario to talk about, right? Like, what, Torrey Craig and, like, I don't know, like somebody like that, having to replace those guys. And those guys are kind of your guard defenders outside of DeLon, who is also a free agent. I think there's more optimism about bringing him back because he might just take the veteran minimum plus the raise, which is what they did with K-Love last summer. So, like, there doesn't seem to be much worry about that. But Caleb and Haywood were your fours and were your guard defenders. And it's like, yeah, you didn't want them to be your full-time fours, but those were nice, like, really nice additions for them over the years because of their defense, and has helped them, form that defensive identity outside of Jimmy and Bam. And just having other guys who can do that, it's going to hurt to see one or two of them go. And I think that's probably likely at this point, just given the current state of the roster, unless they do some, interesting maneuvering. My guy, Brian Goins from Heat Beat today, pointed out that maybe Thomas Bryant and Jay Rach decline their options, but accept the veteran minimum. And that helps the Heat get a little bit further away from the second apron. I don't know. I don't know exactly how they could do it. But it does seem like Caleb is probably going to be gone if another team offers double digits per year. I don't know how much a team is going to be willing to offer him. I think he had a really up and down year. And outside of that, when you mentioned Pat referencing changes, right? And that's the first thing he came out with, right? He always does like a monologue at the beginning of his press conferences. And that was, changes were kind of mentioned. But then, that was interesting in the moment. But then, you keep hearing, and as you mentioned there, that it was really more about the availability. I think he was referencing the way that they do things, and he was trying to be kind of like broad about it or vague, I guess, because he's not blaming it on one way of doing things. He's saying like whatever you guys are doing when it comes to Jimmy and Tyler, who are really the subjects of his availability talk, whatever you're doing is not working, right? Tyler missed a ton of games this year, has missed games in the past, and a lot of it has been like freak injury stuff, but it's just kept happening. Jimmy obviously had, probably his worst regular season in a Heat uniform this year. Was still good, right? But had a down year, I think, in his effectiveness, missed games. Some of it due to injury, and some of it due to, personal reasons that were very real. And I think it was just a tough season, right? And it's 2 straight. And I think he is not in a position to be your 1A guy during the regular season. He's made that clear, right? Like he's not going to do that. He can be out there, but he's not going to give you his full effort. And as much as he wants to deny the playoffs and stuff, like, come on.
But why do they allow him to do that when they didn't let Braun and D Wade and all these other guys like
they've softened up?
No, huh?
They've softened up. Like according to Ethan, Ethan is the one who's been around these guys forever, and it's a lot of the same people in the organization. They've softened up on the stars. Like it's not the same era that it used to be, right? Yep. Like and Jimmy Butler is somebody who has, power played his way out of multiple places. Like he can. I don't think they have a good relationship because they're aligned on the same things. They care about the same things, but like they're not micromanaging Jimmy in any way. And he barely even like speaks to the media. Like Bam is that guy who is kind of like the face of the organization when it comes to having to do all the day-to-day stuff. I mean, Jimmy's just as much of a part of it. I'm just saying, like, I think some of it is just like this is the reality with older stars now. Is you've seen it with LeBron, you've seen it with kind of the Clipper stars. Like there's going to be a certain way that you manage the season. I think it's all part of like a bigger subject when it comes to the de-emphasis of the regular season in the NBA, and that's kind of being the result of them not wanting to shorten the season in the first place. It's like, well, we're not going to shorten the season. We're not going to bust our ass 82 games plus preseason plus playoff games. You know what I mean? Like everybody knows it's about the playoffs, about winning in the playoffs. So I think seeding is less important. Seeding and winning every game in the regular season is less important to these stars, especially the older ones who have a lot of playoff miles on them. And that's just kind of the way that you go about it now.
I mean, it's also because their contracts are fully guaranteed. So it's like, if I know I'm making a certain amount of number.
Yeah, but that's been like that forever at this point,
Yeah, but and it goes back with another thing that you mentioned. Yeah, the Heat organization may have softened up, Alex, but the way that I see it also is kind of like, it's just the way the world is these days. Like, it kind of is the way it is. Like we talk about as fans, as kids in the 90s, we saw all these guys play 82 games. These guys, these days kind of know that they don't have to. Like they're going to get paid regardless, the same thing. Back in the days, playing 82 game was a badge of honor, but now it's like, whatever, just get me to the dance and I'll do the bare minimum and give it my all when I have to, and I'll get paid the same. But it's funny you mentioned some things, my man, and I have a good one for you because I know in the whole thing we've talked about Trae Young, Donovan Mitchell, and all these possibilities of what could happen. I want to talk to you about actual reality, Alex, and I want to get your opinion on something because we got the draft next month.
Oh yeah,
and free agency is great. Trading
for 2 picks. They never have 2 picks,
dude. We should be stoked about this. Like we're talking about Trae Young and Donovan Mitchell. Great. That's fine. But let's wait till July 1st. Let's talk about what we can control, the draft. So I want to ask you one question, my man. And it's kind of a two-parter. But the first one I want to ask you, because there's a name that's being floated around. I'm sure you know it. Zach Edey. The last time we had a player who fit that caliber type of play was Hassan Whiteside. We know what happened back then. So my question for you, bro, and like I said, this is a two-parter, but I don't want to ask you both right now. I want to start with Zach Edey. Alex, do you feel that Zach Edey is actually a good fit on this Miami Heat roster with this current roster?
So a couple of disclaimers first. I'm definitely not a college guy. None of us are.
I know are either.
No, I know like some of the players I've looked into a few guys, but I'm not anywhere near like done looking at all the guys in the draft.
Okay,
I'm just getting started. We're usually doing pods about the playoffs at this time, so it's a little bit weird. We got a little bit more time this time, whereas like last year, as soon as the season ended, we had to dive right into the draft stuff because it was like next week or something. But now we've got some time to really dig into it. And as far as Zach Edey goes, he's definitely somebody that I know his game. Obviously, we got to see a lot of him during March Madness. Has been in college for years, and I was familiar with his game before. I think he's a good player. And everybody like knows his flaws, right? Like he seems to be the most polarizing guy because a lot of people don't believe that he's going to be able to defend in space in the NBA at a consistent rate. I think I tend to lean there. I don't think that, it's not as far as like, oh, he's not an NBA player or anything like that. I personally wouldn't use the 15th pick for the Heat on Zach Edey. I don't think he's a fit next to Bam. I know yesterday there was the videos going around of him making wide open shots at NBA Draft Combine. That's great. I've seen Omer, Dwayne Dedman, Orlando Robinson, Thomas Bryant, all these guys absolutely nail open threes in practice. That's what NBA players do. It's great. Like maybe he will do it someday. I'm just not moved by like clips like that. It's cool to see it. And somebody pointed out his shot kind of looks like Jokic. That's great. Can you make it like Jokic? And to give him credit, what he's good at. I'm not trying to trash him or anything. I really, it's just my opinion. Like he's really good. The interior scoring. He's got good touchdown there. He's huge, and that still matters. Even I just think it's been de-emphasized if you can't move in space.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big question for him that'll keep him on an NBA floor. It's like, honestly, what is it that the Heat have in the second round, 43rd or 45th pick?
Yeah.
Yep.
I would, if he was there, I would actually consider that. But that's more of like my preference that they go with they get a big with the second round pick because I don't know if there's a big that's worth the 15th pick. There might be. I haven't looked into it enough. Like guys like I think his name is pronounced Ives Missy and Kel'el Ware. I haven't looked into these guys enough to be honest. But I think Zach Edey would be kind of a weird fit. Maybe as a backup 5, he'd be cool. Not playing 15 minutes. That could be like his role. But is that what you want out of the 15th pick? I don't know. I'm not sold on him.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that and how you mentioned earlier to get a big that kind of spaces the floor next to Bam in free agency. I've been mentioning in other videos that the draft has that because I know I mentioned Zach Edey. There's two guys. One of the guys you mentioned, Kel'el Ware, but there's another guy from Duke, Kyle Filipowski. These are guys that hit the three, space the floor, 7-footers, can block the shot. So they're good both offensively, defensively. Now, this question,
guys that you think I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm just trying to like play off of what you're saying. Are those guys that you mentioned? Because again, I haven't looked enough into everybody yet. I'm more asking than anything. Is there any one of them, or do you feel this way about all of them, that they'll be more than comfortable with the majority of their shots on the Heat if you were to play next to Bam coming from 3? And how much of these guys are volume 3-point shooters?
I would say Kyle Filipowski from Duke. Like when I look at him, I see him in that Kelly Olynyk, Myers Leonard role, but he can actually be better because his defense is a lot better than those guys. Kel'el Ware kind of fits that, but I think in this Miami Heat system, it would be Kyle Filipowski. And this is actually to the next thing I do want to ask you, because in the draft, I think what we need is either a center or a point guard. There's a lot of other point guards, guys like Jared McCain from Duke, guys like Devin Carter, Anthony Carter's son.
I haven't looked into him yet. I've been meaning to. A lot of people like him on our Discord server.
No, he's looking good. So what I want to hear from you, Alex, is do you think that the Heat in this draft should be looking at a center or a possible backup point guard for Terry Rozier?
Honestly, if I had to pick between one of those two, I would probably go big. And like I said, I'm hesitant just because I haven't looked enough into all the guys. Like I've seen a little bit of Kel'el Ware. I've seen he's very athletic. I saw he had a good 3-point percentage. I haven't yet seen his volume numbers because again, I think it's a difference between being able to shoot and okay, your role is more often than not you're going to be taking the 3 because you're not going to be the rolling to the rim.
Yep.
And I think that if there's somebody in that role that makes sense that fits defensively. I'm intrigued for sure. And you mentioned Filipowski. He's a Duke guy. The Heat obviously have Duke ties and have drafted Duke guys before. I think I've seen that he's kind of in that range too in a lot of mock drafts. So that's kind of interesting. I think if you're just talking positional need, I'm probably going big just because their guard room is a little bit weird right now. Like there's a lot of people in it right? Like there's Tyler, there's Terry, there's Duncan. They picked up DeLon, and obviously Patty as well. I don't like Patty and even DeLon kind of were. It felt like fringe guys who played when others were hurt. I think DeLon has a chance to really be just like an every night rotation player. I feel like they can bring back Patty too if they wanted to, just as like a third string guy to play, like I mentioned, when others are out, not to be a full-time rotation player. Like it was unfortunate that we had to see so much of him in the playoffs, and I love Patty. Like I respect the hell out of him. That's just my opinion on as far as like did I want him in the playoff rotation for the Heat? No. But yeah, like I think they have a lot in their guard room right now, and I don't know how much space they have minutes wise for another guy, just based on the current state of the Heat. Because like I know everybody wants Tyler gone. I'm still skeptical that he's going to be gone if it's not for a star upgrade. I don't know what trades are out there that the Heat would love that are like, let's say, 2 rotational pieces who, you know what I mean? Like the one that a lot of times gets pointed out in our Discord server, which by the way, in the description of every 5 on the Floor podcast, if you're interested, is like the Heat trading with the Nets for like Dorian Finney-Smith and Cam Johnson, right? And it's Tyler going out. Like I get the appeal in something like that. I don't know that that's available. I don't know what type of trade is out there that the Heat would do where they're exchanging 1 for 2 in that way. I think they want to move up. I think they've been trying to get that star. They've made it clear, and sometimes to their detriment, as people have pointed out. It's like they really want the star, and Tyler is going to be one of those guys using in the potential trade package, along with probably, as much as people hate to say it, and I hate to say it, like 1 or 2 of Jaquez and Jovic and a first-round pick and maybe another first-round pick. Like that's the type of price you got to pay now for that big star upgrade. And I think that's what they're trying to get done first and foremost. I'm just, again, skeptical that it's gonna happen. Like I would love for Donovan to be available. I expect him to get roundly beaten tomorrow in Boston, because I don't think Donovan is going to play for that either. And maybe he does ask out. I'm just not expecting it. I'm not going into the summer expecting it. It's just we've all dealt with so much recent pain when it comes to this, but it is really hard to get done. Like it's more than just pushing a button and getting Donovan Mitchell. Like so much has to go right. Even last year with Dame, so much what they wanted happened with him just saying Miami, 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 and then last moment his agent budged and told him, okay, we'll be okay playing in Milwaukee or Brooklyn, and that kind of changed everything. And also Joe Cronin was pretty petty about not wanting to send him here. But just that's the thing. Human nature gets in the way of these trade negotiations. Like there's a lot of parties involved. It's hard to make these types of things happen. It's not just free agency where you sign a guy, right? Like it's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of parties involved. And so I don't expect this to happen. But that's the boring answer, I guess.
Yeah. Do you think, Alex, if we're actually healthy, because again, Pat mentioned the changes that might come is just Tyler needs to work on his nutrition and lifting, and just Jimmy might need to work with our internal trainers or whatever. Do you think that's going to be enough, like just being available and being healthy to help us win a championship? Because we know offensively, we're the 21st rated team. Bam and Jimmy are not.
I mentioned it so many times.
Right? They're not the most seamless duo. They're not Murray and Jokic. They're not like the best combination of players. So even offensively, when we had those little windows where everybody was healthy, we still like stunk offensively. Like we were still bottom 3 in scoring. So do you think being healthy is enough if we go in with the same roster? Because I'm thinking if we do try to trade Tyler Hero hypothetically, I would be intrigued getting 2 guys that make that 15 million for Tyler. He makes around 30 million next year. Getting like a KCP who makes 15, like a Bruce Brown who can come for 15. Those little changes kind of help the Denver Nuggets. They have a 2-star system, and then they have really good pieces like Aaron Gordon, who tried to be a number 1 on Orlando, obviously was not the guy. Now he's the 3rd, 4th guy playing a great role, and he's one of the best, 3 or 4s in the NBA in his role. So that's, I guess, a 2-part question. Do you think if we're healthy offensively, we could be good enough to contend and compete and actually win a championship? Or would you rather go the route of trying to trade like a Tyler Hero to get more functional, athletic, skillful players, like with more size?
I'm not against it. to be honest. Again, it's got to be the right deal. But like, if we're just to have that one as a template, go back to Dorian Finney-Smith and Cam Johnson one, I can be talked into it. Cam Johnson has also had his fair share of availability issues, but I do understand the appeal where it's like that's somebody who would fit right in, as a movement shooter. I do think it's a little tough trading Tyler and not getting back somebody who you consider to be like a very nice offensive player in return, at least, because of how anemic their offense already is. I do get the thinking of just kind of replacing his contract with two smaller ones and, making it a little bit more versatile, just two guys who might fit in nicely and just kind of, essentially not taking an L on the Tyler Hero experience because he was a great pick at 13 or 14, whatever he was. He's still a good player. I'm not nearly as down on him as others are. I don't think of him as like a star foundational piece. I just think of him as a good player. And I think he got put into a really unfair spot, if I'm being honest, as far as like, at the end of it all, he came back and was instantly thrust into like the number one option against the Boston Celtics when we all know he's not that guy. Like, he's supposed to be a supplementary piece for Jimmy. And I spent so much of the season on 5 on the floor talking about like, the theory of having Tyler and Terry in the mix, as well as Hawkins and Jovic to a lesser degree, and like other essentially guys who can make plays, and having that around Jimmy, who was aging a little bit, so he wouldn't have to do as much of it. We didn't really get to see that much of it. Not that it was amazing when they all played or anything like that. Duncan had his improvement. Like, I felt like they had more in theory individually with their shot creation. And I wanted to see how it could all play out if you just shorten the rotation, play your 8-9 best guys, and they were all healthy. I don't think that was going to win the championship, if I'm being honest, but I do think they could have, put up a real fight against Boston. And then you see how the rest of the East is playing out. Like, Boston, the freaking Red Sea has been parted for them, man. Like, they're going to be there. They're going to be in the finals most likely because they're playing against playing a bunch of teams that are just completely depleted right now. Not to hate on them. Like, they're a great team. They were probably the, most likely to make it to the finals anyways, but they're getting there with not too much resistance. It happens every year, right? People get injured, but man, it's just like the East is absolutely depleted right now. And, I come back to that and, I wouldn't mind trading Tyler. I'm just not in a rush to trade him unless it's for the right deal. And again, I think the Heat, their MO is still, what happens to Donovan, what happens with another star. And, even like, I wonder if they check in on a guy like Brandon Ingram. Not that, that's been talked about or anything, or that it's a perfect fit. But, hey, I think Ingram is probably a better player than Tyler Hero. And he wouldn't be guarded as the number one option here like he was when Zion was out. So kind of some parallels there as far as like being put into an unfair situation because he was supposed to be the number 2 for Zion and he ended up having to be the number 1. But whatever, like I think I'm open to all these things. And I feel like there was another part there that I forgot to answer. I'm sorry.
I think you did. I think we're good.
Okay. I felt like I was gonna go somewhere else and then I just lost my train of thought.
You killed it.
I was just rambling.
No, we love it. Thank you so much for all the insightful information. Really appreciate you hopping on the show. Do you want to plug anything? I know you guys obviously we have our own channels. We obviously
let them know where to find you, man.
Exactly. We assume you guys all follow 5 Reasons, but is there anything you want to plug?
Other than 5 on the floor, not really. Check out the podcast. I mentioned the Discord server earlier. We're still doing stuff on playback where during the season we watch the games of fans, but we're watching other NBA playoff games. We're going to be doing draft stuff as the draft gets closer, doing deep dives, and we're going to be doing. This hasn't even been announced yet, really. So maybe you're getting an exclusive here that we're going to be doing like a weekly kind of like the way that our old Floor is Yours shows. Floor is Yours has been converted into a different podcast now that's about the NBA, but we're going to be doing essentially a live show on playback where we answer the questions of fans, which we kind of already do with the other playbacks, but this is going to be more just like a Q&A type of thing and not like a topic thing, like which is what we do a lot of times on playback. So check that out, playback.tv/5RSN, or download the app. Excuse my voice a little bit, it's kind of hoarse right now, but yeah, 5 on the Floor, check us out, and yeah, man.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Martel, any closing thoughts?
Hey, listen, Alex, thank you so much, guys. Make sure that you guys head over to their channel Like, share, comment, subscribe, and we appreciate all the support.
And that is enough said. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, guys.